In this learning module, we will review practices, policies, and procedures linked to multi-tiered supports. In education, we know there are lots of policies at the federal, state, and local level that we have to abide by, but for the sake of this training, we will be reviewing the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and how it relates to the multi-tiered systems of support and practices, policies, and procedures. Let's identify what is ESSA and the impact at the federal, state, and local level. The Every Student Succeeds Act, otherwise known as ESSA, was signed by President Obama in December 2015 and reauthorized the 50-year-old Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA, signed into legislation by President Lyndon B. Johnson, who believed that full educational opportunity should be our first national goal. From its inception, ESEA was a civil rights law. To learn more about ESSA, or the ESEA Act, you will find these resources linked in at the end of this presentation. Oklahoma outlined an 8-year strategic plan, otherwise referred to as the Oklahoma EDGE Plan, for implementing ESSA. The 8-year strategic plan, called Oklahoma EDGE, in response to the U.S. Department of Education for states to update their consolidated plans. We have built these 4 key pillars. Number 1, achieve academic success. 2, build exceptional educators in schools. 3, create engaged communities. And 4, develop internal capacity. LEAs that receive federal and state funding in either of these areas should adopt evidence-based practices that align with ESSA and Oklahoma EDGE Plan. However, it is important that we remember it is more than just implementing and participating because of financial capital. The focus should be centered on what's best for students and stakeholders. Policies, procedures, and practices emerge and depend upon the feedback and data at different levels of systems. Individuals, staff, and families have a voice and should engage in helping schools develop practices that are beneficial for the students and community. In return, the policies developed at the school and community level have a direct impact on what is developed at state and federal levels, and vice versa. This is the reason it's important to evaluate policy development and practices at each level. One of the ways this can be achieved is through schools developing school climate teams to monitor the success and effectiveness of the school site's policies, procedures, and practices. The school climate team should be making sure practices and policies align at the site with district and state policies. To learn more about building a school climate team, check out the lesson, What are School Climate Teams?, in Module 2. One of the important aspects of the school climate team is to make sure the school is implementing evidence-based practices. Some of the evidence-based practices associated with improving school climate are trauma-informed, positive behavior interventions and supports, response to intervention, and social-emotional learning. As the school team begins to implement, there will be a need to review current school policies and procedures. As the school team begins to evaluate those best practices that align with their school goals, it's important to remember that implementation is a journey. Let me repeat, it is a journey. And the journey will include reviewing current school policies and procedures frequently to make sure they are current and reflect your school and district's current work. The implementation of the practice should be through a tiered approach. A multi-tiered approach is defined by ESSA as a comprehensive continuum of evidence-based systemic practices to support a rapid response to students' needs, with regular observation to facilitate data-based instructional decision-making. Meaning that local education agencies should establish a framework of individualized, targeted, and universal practices. Universal practices are experienced by all students and educators across all settings to establish a predictable, consistent, positive, and safe climate. Targeted practices are designed for groups of students who need more structure, feedback, instruction, and support than Tier 1 alone. Individualized interventions meet the challenges of students who need more support than Tiers 1 and 2 offer. It's important to remember that students receiving Tier 2 and 3 supports should also receive Tier 1 supports. These evidence-based practices and procedures implemented by state and local education agencies align with policies designed to create equitable, sustainable, and culturally responsive education systems for all stakeholders. These practices are cross-cutting and align with the pillars and strategies outlined in the Oklahoma EDGE plan. A major part of transforming school climate is reviewing cross-cutting, which addresses academics, behavior, safety, social, emotional, and mental health needs for all students. At the school-wide level, it addresses all students' needs no matter what the school setting, and uses evidence-based practices. Described as the most scaled-up evidence-based practice in the human services industry, school-wide PBIS, or Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, has been implemented in 50 states and over 19,000 schools across the United States, with sustainable funding avenues through formula dollars. Pillar 1 of the Oklahoma EDGE plan, Strategy 1.4, enable educators to meaningfully use data from a high-quality assessment and accountability system to increase student learning. Strategy 1.5 states that we will reduce barriers to equity and close the opportunity and achievement gap for all students. In Pillar 2, Strategy 2.2 states to provide support and professional learning to increase instructional capacity for teachers and leaders. Strategy 2.3 states, provide district and school leaders with training and support needed to improve instruction in their schools. In Pillar 3, Strategy 3.1 says, we will advocate for a strong public education system and elevate the education profession. Strategy 3.2, strengthen and increase family and community engagement to support student learning. Strategy 3.3, build and maintain working relationships and ongoing feedback mechanisms with diverse partners and advisory groups. In Pillar 4, Strategy 4.1 is to sustainably improve and strengthen agency capacity to fulfill its mission by sharing knowledge and best practices across all teams, developing skills, and improving teamwork. Strategy 4.2 states, leverage technology systems and governance collaboration to improve access to data while protecting student information, allowing the Oklahoma State Department of Education and districts to make data-informed decisions. By implementing a multi-tiered systems framework at your building, you are meeting these strategies of each of the 4 pillars. While school teams have lots to consider, one of the main points is to make sure current practices are understandable for all stakeholders and policies are updated to reflect the practices. So these are considerations to take in as you build out this MTSS practices, policies, and procedures at your site or district. Alignment and integration of evidence-based practices, how the practice or initiative aligns with school district goals and mission, Find commonalities in your evidence-based practices to align. How philosophical and perspectives can differ when implementing practices. The overall focus on meeting students' needs. And is the practice equitable, sustainable, and culturally responsive? Here you will find access to the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 and the Oklahoma EDGE Plan. They are also linked in below this video recording.